Hello, hello, hello. So you know how people and preachers in particular, I'm speaking of, will have sayings or I guess idioms or teachings that kind of elaborate on a certain subject, but they sound clever or they rhyme, and people take that teaching or that saying as if it is the truth, as opposed to it just being a expounding on the truth. Well, recently I was listening to a minister preach, and they were talking about how in Hebrews it says about Abraham, it says that he was following God or putting his trust in God, who gives life to the dead and calls those things that be not as though they were. And that's a teaching. That's a general teaching about faith. If we're going to imitate God, we use faith to call things that are not as though they were, right? You speak things that you don't see yet, because God spoke them into existence. He's taught us, have faith in me, have faith in God, speak to it, right? And they said, as I've heard many times taught before, he said he calls those things that be not as though they were. It's not that he says he calls those things that are as though they're not. And that's an instruction to teach us basically not to be in denial, right? Faith is not about ignoring circumstances. Faith is not about saying, oh, no, there's no problems here. I have faith that there is no problems. That's not the instruction on how God has us operate. But when I heard him say it this last time, I go, is that what God says though? I start to question. I start to say, well, maybe there's more to it. We take that saying and they almost turn it into, well, what God said, he said one thing, so that means he said something else. Well, no, if he didn't say that something else, unless he says that something else to you, he didn't say it, right? He taught you one thing. God calls those things that be not as though they were. But then I thought, there is a way that we can call things that are as though they're not, in a sense, because Jesus told us, if you have faith as a grain of mustard seed, you will say to this sycamine tree, whatever that kind of tree is, be plucked up from the roots and be cast into the ocean, and it will be done. There's a thing there, there's a tree, or maybe there's a mountain there in the way, and you're speaking to it. You're not denying it. Now, I grant that. You're not just saying, well, that mountain's not there, but you are speaking. That's how you would call a thing that is as though it's not. You speak to it and you say, you get out of my life, you get your situation out of my face, you be plucked up from the roots, you be lifted up from here, and you be cast into the sea. Amen. Be blessed.